Welcome to the Black Doctoral Network's weekly web series, Conversation Starters. I'm your moderator, Dr. Kimberly West, and I'm delighted that you are joining us as we discuss the value of student engagement in graduate studies. During this episode, we will discuss the importance of student engagement in graduate studies, the relationship between student engagement and academic success, and the role of academic leadership in promoting student engagement opportunities. Our guests this evening bring a wealth of expertise and experience. So let's get the conversation started by introducing our guest. Our first guest is Stephanie Austin-Campbell. Mrs. Austin-Campbell is an Associate Director of Graduate Admission for Piedmont University. She has a BS in Criminal Justice with a minor in Psychology and a Master's of Business Administration. She has also taught college-level marketing and management courses. Prior to her position at Piedmont University, Mrs. Austin-Campbell worked at the University of Georgia and served as the Executive Coordinator to the CEO at the University of North Georgia. She is a wife and a mom, and in her spare time, she enjoys traveling, reading, arts and crafts, and spending time with her family. Welcome, Mrs. Austin-Campbell. It's a pleasure to speak with you this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Our second guest is Dr. Erica Chew. Dr. Chew is the Graduate Outreach and Academic Advisement Coordinator and instructor at SUNY Empire State College. She holds a Ph.D. in Higher Education Administration from Old Dominion University, an MED in College Student Affairs, and a graduate certificate in Career Counseling from the University of South Florida. And she also holds a BA in Sociology from Emory University. Erica's academic research focuses on the experiences of Black immigrant college students, identity development of marginalized groups, racial equity in STEM graduate programs, and retention issues in graduate education. She is a wife and mom and an active member in the Bronx chapter of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, and she is also a part of the Jackie Robinson Foundation Alumni Association. Dr. Chew, welcome this evening.
Hi, how is everyone?
Good to have you. Our final guest for this episode is Dr. Joseph Brown. Dr. Joseph Brown. Dr. Joseph Brown is a first-generation college student and an Army brat from San Antonio, Texas. He is a Ph.D. alum of Stanford's psychology program, and his research focuses on the impact of stereotypes and prejudice on the intellectual identities and performance of minorities and women. He is the Assistant Dean of Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Education and Graduate Recruitment for Stanford's School of Humanities and Science. Welcome, Dr. Brown.
Good to be with you.
Well, I'm excited to get our conversation. Welcome to everyone. So let's get this party started, right? My first question to you, and I'm going to pose that to you, Dr. Chew, is what is student engagement and why is it important?
Sure. So student engagement, put simply, is involvement in personal and professional development. Ideally, it's active involvement in school-related activities. But I say it doesn't have to be limited to school activities, but seen as professional development and personal development. Most institutions offer a plethora of support services, fellowships, assistantships, programming for the students, and students should participate in them. They're distributed intentionally and for the growth of students. And so it's a way to, one, get your name out there, right? You're interfacing with other colleagues or other students in your field. You're interfacing with faculty in your field, and potentially with professionals in your field. And that's a way of doing some networking. And then there are ways of getting opportunities to do various things that can build your resume.
Oh, wow. Mrs. Austin-Campbell, I want to come to you next. So how do you define student engagement?
Well, for me, it's a personal level because I am working towards my doctoral degree, whereas I have not yet reached that pinnacle. I am on the trajectory to do so. And it's being committed to your work, to the craft, and to your abilities to basically get the job done. And we're all lifelong learners, must have that passion to learn. And everyone here on this call, that speaks volumes, because you're here because you have that level of commitment to learn. And that's the greatest return on your investment, is the investment into yourself. So just being engaged in your own personal endeavors.
All right. So I hear from student engagement is both from the outside and then it's also intrinsic, right? And so, Dr. Brown, how would you describe, or how would you define student engagement and why it is important for students?
Okay, let me make an admission. I wasn't quite sure what was meant by student engagement.
Okay.
So I like to think about student engagement and all the activities that students are involved in terms of graduate study, in terms of the kinds of behaviors that are afforded to them in the graduate environments that they inhabit, and also what sort of frames do they bring to that engagement. And perhaps later on we can talk about some of the barriers, the challenges that get in the way of students fully engaging in graduate study and those professional development activities that are out there. But one of the things that I often see students struggle with is seeing themselves as professionals from the very beginning of their involvement in graduate study. And I think there are lots of things that contribute to that. But one of the things that can get in the way of sort of seeing oneself as a professional is sort of seeing sort of one's sort of a professional identity as sort of aspirational, that one day I'm going to get there, as opposed to I'm there now. I'm a sociologist right now in the first day of the first year of my doctoral program. I'm a cancer biologist in the first day of that program. When one starts to see oneself as a professional from that first day, then those activities that involve connecting with scholars all over the country and in your department, outside of your department, young scholars, older scholars who share the same scholarly interests as you, becomes very important. Because as a professional, you want to have a network of folks who will stimulate you and stimulate your development. You want to look for opportunities to grow, to build, to develop that constellation of skills that you want to have as an effective professional. And so it's that frame that I think really facilitates students taking advantage of networking opportunities and professional development opportunities. But I think there are a lot of things that are a part of the environment that Black graduate students are a part of that can get in the way of them smoothly adopting that identity and essentially taking a growth mindset approach to their development as scholars. And so hopefully, we can talk about some of those barriers and challenges as the conversation continues.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I know you said you weren't quite sure of the definition of student engagement. And so I would like to, even as we converse, kind of build that. Because again, I've heard from you, it's intrinsic, it's extrinsic, it's the relationship that you build. And so as you all were talking, I was thinking of our next question, which is, how would you describe the relationship between student engagement and academic achievement? And so I want to come to you first, Mrs. Austin-Campbell. How would you describe that relationship?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, again, I like to personalize it. It's what you put in is what you will get out. And you just need to think outside of the box and be flexible and adaptable and creative in your endeavors. If that entails reading articles at 4 a.m. in the morning, just so that you can get the work done that you need and have that balance between your work life and your personal life, then that is the place that you need to be in. It's showing up with your best self every day and in every issue of or endeavor of your academic career and your both personal and professional life.
And I like how you personalize that, because as you're talking and giving it from your personalized perspective, I think a lot about on that PhD journey.
Yeah.
That can be, I think most people who've undertaken that journey will say it could be a lonely road. And so student engagement is important. What would you say, Dr. Brown? What would you say to that and the importance between the relationship?
Well, I think it's vital to academic success, but I also want to step back and make clear that academic success isn't about grades in doctoral study, because actually nobody really gives a damn about your grades in doctoral study. So, you're expected to make A's and maybe a B or two, and after that, nobody cares, because the most important measure of academic success in doctoral study is your own faculty's evaluation of your progress in terms of your development as a scholar. Right? And so, uh, how do you first have an understanding of what their expectations are? And how do you stay in communication with your faculty so that they know what you're up to? But especially your faculty advisor, because I think one thing that students often don't understand is that it isn't simply that your faculty advisor has a responsibility to help you develop, to mentor you as a developing scholar. They also represent you to the rest of the university, to the department, and to the rest of the university in terms of advocating for you. And think about what's just happened. We've just spent almost 2 years, folks doing grad study virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And so, on top of the normal challenges in terms of engaging with faculty to understand their expectations so that you can meet them, uh, uh, staying in touch with your faculty, you can't just pop into their office because you have to connect with them via Zoom. And I can't tell you how many graduate students I've talked to over the last almost 2 years who I keep emailing my professor and she doesn't respond. What do I do? Right? So, in the last 2 years, we've seen an exacerbation of the challenges that students face in terms of getting an understanding of the expectations that their faculty have for them, and understanding how best to stay in touch with faculty so that they can advocate for you and actively participate in their role as mentors for students. So, in some ways, I want to argue that this student engagement can't simply be about what students are doing, because it involves your engagement with other important people that are in that graduate school environment. And what do you do as a proactive person when you're not getting all the information, all the contact that you feel you need to be effective in graduate school?
Hmm. Wow. You brought up something, and it takes me to my next question, and I want to come to Dr. Chu for this, because you've kind of highlighted something, and so I'll be transparent and say, as a person who defended their dissertation via Zoom, I'm just being honest here, right? Thank you, COVID-19. How has this shift, right, from the direct contact to remote hybrid learning impacted student engagement? Dr. Chu, what do you think?
Sure. So I can't speak on it tremendously. So I defended at the end, right? So 2020, I defended, right? So I ended up had to be over Zoom, which I actually intended to, because I had moved to New York by the time my program is in Virginia. So it was going to have to be online anyway. But I think you have to be more proactive, one, in terms of reaching. And to answer your question from the last one a little bit, and piggyback off what the gentleman was saying, part of student engagement is having a relationship with faculty so that they can understand who you are, so that if something is off, they can be able to intervene, right? And it's hard to do when you're across the country, or even, in your house, to know, especially from the faculty perspective, to know what's up with your students, to be able to gauge how much or how little I need to engage with them, right? And so that's a huge thing that's happened. And I don't know how to even, rectify that really at this point, right? You can try to You have to definitely be more proactive in terms of your engagement with faculty. And then you also have to be creative in finding other people that can help you as well. So, because it might not be the faculty member, it might be a professional staff, it might be somebody else that's in an organization that you're pursuing. It might be your cohort members if you're in a program with others. So, knowing who to tap for what.
Dr. West, I'd like to.
Yes, I just got in my mind.
Because we are actually, the cohort that I'm in, we're actually Zooming tomorrow because we're all struggling with the chapter. And so it's good to have that peer-to-peer interaction. And we're all in different places as far as learning the material. So someone may have a bright idea or an idea that we haven't thought of. So it's good to stay connected with your peers as well as the instructors, because the instructors are getting paid to do that, but the peers, you're all in that together. So you're wanting to make sure that you understand and to help them along the way. As I know for me, that's how I am. I want to help them along the way as well as sort of a mentor-mentee relationship.
Yes, for sure. I see you shaking your head, Dr. Brown. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. I think one of the best things that doctoral students can do is recognize that not all wisdom flows from the faculty, and they want to think about constructing a constellation of mentors, including mentors who aren't in the department, but who you can check in with, graduate students who you can work with whom you can set up relationships such that I'm going to send you 2 chapters. And if I don't send you those 2 chapters, here's what you can do.
Right.
And hey, what do you need from me so that I can support you in getting your work done? I think the first thing we have to do is recognize that in a time like this, a pandemic, the largest civil rights protests in 25 years. And with that pandemic, the recognition of huge inequities in terms of vulnerability, and the ways that each of us has had to grieve and recognize that the losses that we've experienced. So I think the first thing I think that students have to be is forgiving of themselves, because they're not perfect and they're super, but they're still human. And you've been impacted.
Yeah.
And it means that you've got to adjust your expectations and engage with your faculty and share those expectations and find out what their expectations are and see if you can come to a meeting of the minds. And see if you can come to a meeting of the minds in terms of how you're going to stay in touch. So, Professor Z, I'm not hearing from you regularly, but you know what? I'm going to be sending you a status email once a week with what I've accomplished and what I'll be doing for the next week. So that even if I don't hear from you, you've got in your email inbox regular updates from me. Right? Or creating a shared Google Doc in which you provide information and where your faculty can put in a feedback if they're not able to engage with you via Zoom or FaceTime, or I apologize for or whatever other means of communication that they want, so that you're doing what you can to make your expectations more realistic and ensuring that they're in line with the expectations that your faculty have for you. I think it's a really important approach to take. But I want to end with my first point, which is be forgiving of yourself for having the pandemic and other things impact your progress. You're human. And sometimes there are other things that are more important than your scholarship at that point in time. And that's okay. And to the faculty, that should be okay. But the last thing is that I think faculty are responding in one of 2 ways to all this. Some faculty are responding by resorting to micromanagement. Because they're so anxious on behalf of their students that they're loading up the duties and the expectations and micromanaging in ways that aren't helpful. But other faculty are saying, well, I don't want to make too many demands because, well, hey, I'm struggling to figure out how to deal with this. And so faculty are human too. So I think we also have to recognize that, but still try to engage with them and see if you can come to a meeting of the minds that's helpful for both sides of the mentor-mentee equation.
Hmm.
Can I add a second to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Be aware now, right? I know this is something for me especially at the beginning of the pandemic, you're like, oh, if there are all these online things, I need to attend everything, right? Learn how to turn your, know your limit, and where you don't have to attend everything, make your priorities of what's important and go to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because sometimes you think, well, I'm at home. I don't have anything else to do. I can go to this and I can go to this. And then you're over programming yourself. I want to go back to Mrs. Austin-Campbell, because you said something about meeting with your colleagues via Zoom and connecting in that way. Because I know myself, I still have a writing group. These are some of my friends from UGA. We meet really regularly. We talk. I always say I would have not finished my program without them. I mean, I couldn't have finished it. They were there for me. And so that was an important part of student engagement for myself. And so thinking about, do you think that the availability of graduate student support structures increases student participation during their graduate program?
Absolutely. I can't stress that enough, that we need to rely on each other. And like I said, having that mentor-mentee relationship, someone else in the class may be well-versed in statistics, whereas someone else could be a finance major. All of those backgrounds culminating together can help each person along the way. If someone is struggling, you just reach out to them, or if they reach out to you, you can provide that information, because information is key. And just having the conduit to share that information, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's WhatsApp or whether it's Teams, we have created so many different platforms to communicate and share that information that I feel all 9 of us may walk together, like at the same time, because we're trying to make sure that as we're gathering and doing our research, that we're reaching out and seeing how others are doing so that they can be just as successful.
Yeah. And I know I would appreciate those texts. Kim, have you fallen off the wagon? Where are you? Those type of things are important, right? Like, oh, somebody did notice I didn't show up, or
how's that statistics class coming along?
Yeah, it's not. No, right. Dr. Chu, what do you think? Does this graduate student support structures, the availability of them, does it increase student participation during graduate programs?
It should, if used. So I know, and this is from the perspective of the professionals and the people that are organizing things. Sometimes we create tons of programs that students don't come to, right? But we're creating these spaces that allow for the creation, for the exchanging of the minds, for networking, and then they don't come. So I mean, if you come, yes, and take advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah. Because I mean, the people who sometimes program these things, they think everybody's going to come because everybody needs this, and then maybe 5.
Well, we don't expect everybody, but I mean, at least
right.
2 people come.
Right. Yeah. And so maybe not. Well, yeah. So again, that kind of that connectedness, it really means a lot to know that someone's looking out for you, whether it be someone on the faculty or one of your peers or your colleagues. That's really important. Dr. Brown, I want to ask you this. What types of support structures, and I'm going to pose this to everyone, by the way, but I just want to start with Dr. Brown first. What types of support structures are significant to enhance African-American graduate student engagement?
Boy.
No pressure.
Yes. So I'm going to use an analogy. So there's a lot of research on social psychological interventions that reduce group differences in performance at the undergraduate level. And one of the main findings from research so what is the important factor in those interventions? And one of the most important is that what these interventions do is foster the kinds of continued engagement that allows a student to find a mentor, someone who they see as looking out for them. And that person, at least at the undergraduate level, it might be a professor, it might be a staff person, might be an administrator, it might be a more senior student, right? But no matter what that person's position is, they are seen as a mentor for the student, and that's associated with much stronger academic performance. Now, I don't think it's any different at the doctoral level, although because it's such a scholar apprentice relationship, so that you have this one advisor who has a great deal of power and control. I think it's still the case that when you have programming that increases the chances that a student will find someone else they can connect with. And let's think about this. I think for many, many Black graduate students, they will be the only or one of few Black or few minority students in their department, in their program. And so it's vitally important that we have the kind of programming that allows them to connect with people outside of their department, other students, staff, and faculty. And so those kinds of support structures that foster those kinds of social engagements is vitally important, so that students find those mentors and are able to create outside of those mentors a broader social network that will support them for those inevitable moments when graduate study is frustrating, difficult, and challenging. We often want to think that doctoral study is only about that student with that one or two professors. That's primary, but it's not the only thing. The last point is that for Black students, it's more likely the case, and this is also true for other people of color. It's also true for women. This is also true for students from first-gen and or low-income backgrounds. Those students are not only driven by individualistic concerns about distinguishing themselves, they're also often driven by more interdependent collective concerns, a desire to give back to your community, to help out your family, to be part of a team. And so a lot of what these student engagement programs do at the graduate level is allow students to act on those other motives, to give back to community, to be part of a broader community. And I think faculty are often suspicious about those programs, and they don't understand that participation in those programs fosters retention and fosters academic achievement. I think many faculty don't really understand that.
You brought up something that just made me think about the importance of relationships outside of your mentor or your advisor, especially when you have to consider things such as your committee, right? When you eventually decide who wants to be on your committee, or you're asking, select people, will you please serve on my committee, my dissertation committee? That's important, right? Having that connectedness outside of your mentor. Mrs. Austin-Campbell, what do you think? How do you feel that, what support systems do you think are significant for African American graduate students?
Well, for me, it's hearing experiences from you guys, because I'm trying to get to where you are already. So I always just internalize and personalize. It's just hearing from individuals who have already walked through the trials and or have already made it through to that level. I have aspirations of, being a VP or dean, or maybe even institutional president. So it's just advantageous for me just to have individuals like you all to model what it looks like to be in these leadership positions, and to just kind of take that and know that I can, achieve that as well.
Yeah, Dr. Chew, what do you think? What type of?
Well, you need several things. You need a mentor, right? Someone who's been through or is going through what you're planning on going through. You need cheerleaders, right? You need someone who's going to be rah, because you know there are going to be times that you're like, oh no, I can't do this. You need somebody that's going to push you. Like, you're the best. You can do it. Even, they not even have the degree. They just know, I want to get you to that line. You also need the program assistant of your program. They might be the receptionist or whatever. She knows everything. He or she knows everything about what's going on in the program. All the dots you need to, dot, all the T's you need to cross, all the paperwork you need to sign. That person knows. That was my mama during my program.
I'm making a note of that now.
Yeah, no. When you're saying these positions and these things, I'm thinking the people who are coming to mind. I know who that person was in my department, who knew everything. Who, if I just had a question,
and then just to to piggyback off of Dr. Brown, that's the person that knows. This faculty member has too many people on their list, too many people bothering this person. Go bother this person.
Yes.
That's because they see everything that's going on and they know what's everything that's going on. So yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in the education world, we always say, when you're working in a school, you always want to make, be friends with the custodian and the secretary, right? So those kind of support staff, and it's the same thing when you're getting your degree, right? So making those connections, because I can think about those people. And one of the funny things too is that that cheerleader, I love my family, and people love their family, but sometimes they don't understand the process, right? They're going, aren't you done yet? Have you written that book yet? What are you doing? So having those people there to really cheer you on is very important.
Every little accomplishment is big for them, right? So
yes. They just want to, they just want to tell everybody, so they're really pushing you. So it's great to have those things. And so, as you said, or as Dr. Brown was saying too, that's for all students, but especially sometimes too, if you're a student of color and you may be the only person in your department, you have to be able to step outside of your comfort zone and find and connect with those people. Because if not, it's really easy to, once you get in maybe further into your graduate studies, to go, I don't think anybody would miss me if I just, left, and so that's very important. That's very important. So we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but what is the role of academic leadership in promoting student engagement opportunities? Dr. Chu, I want to come to you. How does academic leadership play a role?
So creating spaces, right? Creating those spaces where students are able to connect with each other, are able to connect with faculty, be able to connect with the community, people in the community. So creating those spaces, whether it's through programming, mentorship program, established mentorship programs, or just introduction, right? Introducing someone to someone because they have a similar interest. So just creating those opportunities, I think, is the most important.
Yes.
And funding them.
And sometimes too, just like you were saying, just showing up to the program, right? This means a lot, that you show that you're vested in me. Mrs. Austin-Campbell, what do you think? What role, because you're in a leadership position, and correct that where you are in your position, what role does academic leadership play in creating these spaces for student engagement?
Basically, everything Dr. Chu said is just, giving back and helping someone else achieve their goals, just so that we all can be successful. We're all in this together. And so if we can help someone else come along the way with us, then to me, that's being a good leader. It's just helping others to achieve their goals as well.
Yeah, I think that funding thing, though, that's important.
It's huge.
Dr. Brown, what do you think? What role does academic leadership play?
Oh, my colleagues have really nailed it. By the way, I think when leadership funds those programs and talks about their importance, there's also a message being communicated. And the message being communicated is that, the experience that Black graduate students may have may be different than the experiences that non-minority students might have. And that it is important for Black students to have the kind of programming and the kind of supports to foster the relationships that will foster their thriving under these kinds of environments. So I think there's a symbolic message being communicated when leadership supports those programs. So years ago, when I returned to Stanford, there was a commission on graduate study, and that studied sort of the status of graduate students at Stanford and how much support they received. And one of the messages from that commission was that minority students needed more support, that they had a tougher time for many reasons, and that there had to be a focus on creating more resources to foster their thriving. And as a result of that, an office of the Vice Provost for Graduate Education was created. And so a lot of programming and funding is provided through that office to support graduate students of color, as well as women in STEM, first-gen, low-income students. But every school at Stanford has programming that is directed towards supporting students of color, because there's a recognition that their thriving in part depends on attending to what they need to thrive. And what they need may be different than what other students may require. And that's a statement about the culture of current academic contexts and whether those cultures promote the thriving of students of color.
You know, I'm going to throw a question out there because listening to you all speak about graduate studies, how, and anybody can, you know, jump in, right? I'm thinking about, we've talked about student engagement as far as making connections, having that support system. But what about when it comes to scholarship? But what about when it comes to attending conferences, getting publications? What would you say to students of color who maybe their only student in their program who's a student of color? What advice would you give to them to work with or engage with someone in their program, so that they can have these scholarship opportunities? Because part of the program is not just for you attending to get this dissertation. You have to also engage in scholarship. So what would you say to them if they're a little apprehensive of dipping their toe in the water when it comes to engaging in scholarship?
Also, it's a lot of the same thing, right? So you're making these relationships so that you can establish essentially professional relationships in a sense, right? The personal relationship often will lead to that professional because you're in those spaces that foster that, right? So ideally, when you're having those conversations with these people that you're meeting at a symposium or whatever, you're realizing, oh, this person is studying what I'm interested, or has or is maybe studying a different aspect of something that I might be interested in. They might be able to bring something, we might be able to come together and do something different, right? So it's basically the same thing. You have to put yourself out there to be able to connect, to be able to communicate with other people, so you can see what people are studying, what people are doing. You can connect with faculty members, right? Because you're having that conversation, like, what are you, what research are you doing or engaging in right now? And having those conversations, you'll be able to fit yourself into spaces that can help you foster your professional academic side.
Yeah, because that engagement in scholarship is important, and that connectedness with others, as you were saying, who may or may not be in your field, but can still contribute to the research that you're conducting.
I have something to add, Dr. Wesk. I just can quickly piggyback off of what Dr. Chew just said. The students who are high academic achievers are extremely engaged. So I, for example, look for opportunities to be creative and step outside of the box and do things like this. For instance, the opportunity presented itself and I did not hesitate to jump on that, because if I want to have that as in my toolkit for going forward, I want to make sure that I have the skill set now, so that when the time comes for me to step into another role, whether it be a VP or a dean or president of the institution, then I want to make sure that I am ready for that by preparing myself now, not waiting until I get to that, but to do the work now and make sure I do my due diligence to say that I have put my time in, just as you all have.
Yes. Yeah. No, I understand. I like how you're speaking it. How you said you're looking forward. You're working on it.
I claimed it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I like that right there. And so I have just a couple more questions for you. The next question is, what are some ways that we can continue to foster the important relationship between graduate student engagement and academic achievement? So I want to come back to you, Dr. Chu. What are some ways that we can continue to foster this important relationship?
Show up. So show up, right? And partly, I'm thinking of some students that I've had, right? I work at an institution that's primarily online, right? So if a scholarship or a sponsorship comes around, it's there. Oftentimes, it's last minute. They say they need to find some students. Who do you know, right?
Mm.
If I'm a faculty member or a professional that has to recommend somebody, right? I'm putting the first person that's on my mind. So that's someone that I've interacted with or I've had some regular interaction with. So just put yourself out there so people know who you are. I think that's the biggest thing.
What do you think, Mrs. Austin-Campbell?
Well, information is key, as I said. So we just continue to do the deep dive and just explore. And we have to do our own due diligence and not just sit back and wait for the professor or someone else to give it to us. We have to go that extra mile to make sure that we keep informing ourselves and being proactive in getting what we need to be successful, not waiting for someone else to, throw it in our lap, because as we know, opportunities do not land that way.
For sure. Dr. Brown, what do you think?
So for the last 2.5, 3 years, my colleague Steve Lee and I have been doing sort of mentoring up workshops for our doctoral students. And these are workshops that are focused on helping students take a proactive role in managing their relationships with faculty. And it goes beyond that to thinking about nurturing relationships outside of faculty, but that's its focus. So I think when we can encourage students to recognize that nurturing these relationships is where real thriving happens and real productivity happens. So there's just irony about doctoral study. And the irony is that every doctoral student is evaluated individually, right? The quality of their dissertation, they're evaluated individually. But success depends on graduate students' ability to collaborate productively with faculty, with other graduate students, with undergrads, with others. And so I think when students can recognize that and recognize that it's not just about how smart you are, though, yeah, that's it. Yes, yes, yes. But it's also about managing relationships, nurturing relationships. And so for someone like me who's an introvert, that's tough. I think for lots of people, that's tough. But it's vitally important. And when students can find ways, and also part of what happens at these workshops, it isn't me and Steve, here's how to do it. It's also convening graduate students. They can share, here's what has worked for me. Here's some of the challenges I'm experiencing. Have you all experienced something like this? So what did you do in this situation? So it allows students to share wisdom with each other, as well as for me and Steve to share, what we've experienced and what our recommendations are. So I think that's really important. It isn't just about how smart you are. It's about a lot of things, including your ability to nurture productive, positive relationships with lots of people. And being of service. So that will be of help to you. But when you can be of service to other people, they are more likely to be of help to you. So I think that's also vitally important.
Yeah. And I want to circle back. I know you had mentioned you wanted to discuss some of the barriers or challenges to student engagement. So what did you mean by that?
So, so my advisor gave a talk last week, and it's part of a conversation I've been having with him since I was his graduate student about how these colleges and universities weren't designed for us. These were institutions of higher education for training gentlemen, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant gentlemen, and what's happened over time is that, we've taken that model and okay, we'll admit women. Okay, we'll admit people of color. But I think what we're only just now starting to do is to ask, well, what's the culture that we're bringing minorities and women into? And is it an academic culture that nurtures their thriving to the degree that it nurtures the thriving of white middle class men? And I think here's how that can play out. So if you're a white middle to upper class man and you're in a graduate program, most of the faculty are going to resemble you more than they'll resemble women and minority graduate students. And so because of that, you may have more conversations with those folks. You may have more engagements with those folks. And as a result of being more comfortable with them, you may have a better understanding of what their expectations are of students at different stages of the academic career. And so you may be more tuned into here's what I need to do to be successful in this environment. And women and minority graduate students may not, because they're not as similar to the faculty, these interactions may not be as smooth, and so they may not get that information that allows them to thrive. And by the way, there's a scholar, Rudy Mendoza-Denton at UC Berkeley in the psychology department, that has done research on this question and has found that when graduate programs are much more open and transparent and explicit about what their expectations are for graduate students year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, guess what? Minority graduate students and women do better. Because part of the hid curriculum that is usually hidden has now been made explicit. And so that's one of the barriers that because of these cultural differences, some graduate students are in that environment and they're not in the know like other graduate students. And what departments have to do is to recognize that and to work to make those expectations explicit and transparent. And when they do, it's better for everyone. By the way, not just minorities and women, it's better for everyone, but it's particularly better for minorities and women. But this is a question we need to be asking. What's the culture that exists in these departments? And how do we adjust that culture so that it fosters the thriving of all students, so that it fosters the engagement of all students? And it's not a trivial question.
I think you bring up a very interesting point, because sometimes students are expected to fit into a model that is, like you said, not a structure that's not built for them. Mrs. Austin-Campbell, I want to give you an opportunity. What do you think are some of the disadvantages or some barriers to student engagement?
Well, listening to Dr. Brown speak, I actually have encountered very similar instances where it seemed as though there were preferential treatment given to the white male men and women in our program versus the African-American women in the program. But we all still try to, thrive and do our very best and stay connected with with everyone in the cohort, just so that we just keep moving forward, not letting anything, putting our foot on the gas and not letting anything derail us from reaching that goal.
Dr. Chew, what do you foresee as some barriers for students?
No, that's very real, Barry. Actually, we were having a conversation in a racialized faculty about faculty experiencing that at my institution. So it's very real. If faculty experiencing it, definitely the students are experiencing. But I mean, other than that, it's, there's the time, because oftentimes doctoral students, especially of color and low socioeconomic, are also working while they're doing their degrees, and time, you tend to be older too, might have families and all that kind of stuff. So that can interfere with the amount of time you can dedicate to extracurricular activities.
Yeah, that's some real talk as someone who earned their doctorate trying to live life, right? Yes,
I
yes.
think we can have a whole nother segment on just that topic.
That is, you got that right. You got that right. Well, I want to thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. I'm sorry, this evening rather. And so I have one final question for you, and I want to start with Mrs. Austin-Campbell. So I'll start with her first. How has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network helped to enhance you personally and or professionally?
I actually attended a conference some time ago and was very impressed. At the time, I was not working on my doctoral degree. And once I began the program in 2020, the very next thing I did after I got accepted was to join this networking organization so that I would be with like-minded individuals to gather whatever I could along the way. And like I said, when this opportunity presented itself, I jumped on it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else is in the pipeline and what other opportunities I can take advantage of.
For sure. Dr. Chew, I want to come to you next.
Yes.
Yes.
So for me, honestly, I was mostly involved with the Ph.D. network through the Facebook group and connecting people through that, finding resources for my dissertation, and and people ask questions about various issues that you're facing within my program. And then once I finished, I started joining because, like as I mentioned when the pandemic started, I started attending everything, and so I decided to start attending Black Doctoral Network events and found it extremely valuable to attend the session. So I'm trying to build my resume and add to my professional growth. And so when I was invited to participate in this, I said, well, this is the area that I'm familiar with, and I'd be happy to do it.
Thank you. Dr. Brown, how has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network helped you?
So I have not been affiliated with the network for long. I've been involved with it in terms of graduate recruitment. And so when this popped up as an opportunity to contribute, I was very happy to do it. So hopefully this is the beginning of more involvement.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you again. This has been a great conversation and a wonderful conversation. Can you please tell everyone how they can get in contact with you? Dr. Chew, how can people get in contact with you?
Sure. My email address is erica, erica.cheweesc, CHEW, at ESC as in Empire State College.edu.
Okay. And Dr. Brown, how can people get in contact with you if they want to follow up?
Yes, folks can connect with me via email, jlbrown@stanford.edu.
And Mrs. Austin-Campbell, how can people get in contact with you?
My email address, which is saustincampbell@piedmont.edu.
All right. Thank you again. I can't thank you enough. As Mrs. Austin-Campbell said, I think we had enough for another conversation. We might have to circle back to that because Dr. Brown brought up some really good points about those barriers. They are real. They are real. And so I want to thank you all for watching this episode of Conversation Starters. Be sure to join us again next Thursday at 7 p.m. for another wonderful episode.
Awesome.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes.